Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of data journalism. We're going to have a two-part this week, two different videos. The first one will be on a couple of cool tools that you can use in data reporting, as well as looking at how to write Twitter threads. And then our second video will be a lecture slideshow on what makes for good data journalism, just kind of an overview. Our homework's down here. 6 things that you'll need to do. Read 3 short chapters. The Digging for Data handout in the week 3 Google Drive folder, make sure you read that. Make sure you read through the census reporting handout. We'll talk about the census a little bit next week. And also get familiar in this ProPublica database of nonprofits, charities, churches, things like that you can look up. You can look up their tax records. It's called the Form 990. We're going to dig into those pretty heavily next week. Short video on spotting a misleading graphic. And then just skim through this Simon Rogers. Simon Rogers oversees data visualizations for Google. He also writes a great e-newsletter on Google Trends, which you'll see a little later in the semester. Make sure you've skimmed through this article that he has on what data journalism looks like today, paying particular attention to his graphic up near the top that kind of shows the workflow of using data. We're going to begin that workflow starting in week 3 and continue it throughout the semester. So to begin with, if you want to open up this little Cool Tool here, Cool Tool and Cool Tool 2, the Google Fact Check Explorer and THSRS, the shorter thesaurus, and then open up this handout on writing great Twitter threads. As always, you can find the handouts and the decks and everything in our week 2 folder. So go ahead and hit pause and open up those files. Then hit restart on the video. All right, welcome back. I'm going to show you the Google Fact Check Explorer first. This is a micro search site that Google has made. They have several of these. You'll be working with some next week called Dataset Explorer and Google Dataset Search. Fact Check Explorer allows you to search fact checks. There are several organizations out there that fact check information that's shared online. And the Fact Check Explorer allows you to search for those, and they are matched up with the stories or the blog posts or the social media posts that they're fact checking. So I can just type in a keyword or a person's name. I'll type in Joe Biden, and up pops the most recent fact checks. And here's a link to them on whatever you see here. And, this was a claim by Donald Trump about Biden. This is a claim by Biden and the fact check. Some of these are also news stories, social media posts, even memes about the person. Sometimes they're fact-checking things they said. Other times they're fact-checking things that are said about them. As you can see, Snopes.com is a popular one. Newsweek does fact checks. Factcheck.org, PolitiFact, the CNN and the Washington Post, USA Today. Fact-checking organizations from all over the world. Rappler is in here. India Today does a lot of really great fact-checking. So you can go in here and find any of these fact checks. During the 2016 election, you may have noticed Google and Facebook really were heavily criticized for putting out a lot of search that led us to stories that had fake news in them, bad information, misinformation, disinformation, and mislead people. The Fact Check Explorer grew out of a little change in Google's search algorithm. By 2017, Google Search started to produce links to fact checks. If you search something in Google News, if you went to news.google.com and searched for a story about someone, and it popped up here, oftentimes if it had a fact check with it, you'd see the fact check appear right here. Right next to a little bullet point, looking to see if there's one on any of these, and there's not. They also have adjusted the algorithm to make sure the fact check pieces don't show up on page 1. So if there's a fact check on it, it usually has a little fact check right here. That means some information in that story has been challenged. So Fact Check Explorer allows you to search those fact checks. Not only can you search by fact check in the search window here, you can look at the most recent fact checks by clicking here. And it gives you the most current fact checks regardless of topic. I typically go here in the mornings and look through here and see what fact checks came through overnight. You can see a lot of the international ones, from India, from other countries. Australia's Associated Press does a lot of really good fact checks. So you can go through and see what's popping up. So Google Fact Check Explorer, helpful if you're going to link to a story, or if you're working the social media desk for a media outlet or for a company and you want to decide, hey, do I want to retweet this story or not? Run a couple keywords through that story through Fact Check Explorer first, and see if it holds water, or if there's been some information that has been fact checked in it. Another good tool, and it's the second one on your syllabus for today, is THSRS, the shorter thesaurus. This will come in handy if you're writing headlines, search engine optimized headlines, typically about 5 to 7 words long. Your search engine optimized headlines are 5 to 7 words, subject, verb, object, structure. Who did what? We talked about that a little bit last week with the Governor Quinn headline in Medium. Well, THSRS allows you to type in a word and hit lookup, and it gives you synonyms, but only words that are shorter than the word you typed in. So if you're writing a very short, tight headline where maybe you only have 75 characters, it shows up well in Google search if it's under 75, 80 characters, and you need to tighten it up a little bit, and you need synonyms that are shorter, this is a good way to go. Use THSRS. This is also good when we get into designing graphics in Data Wrapper and Google Flourish later in the semester. This tool you can use to write shorter, tighter headlines on top of your graphics. So this one will pop up again a little later in the semester. I just wanted to get you a little experience with it now. Great tool just for writing too, but it's really helpful for headlines and for titles on graphics. Next one is open up this handout on how to write social media threads. As we go out throughout the semester, I want each of you to try at least one social media thread with one of your graphic posts. You might be posting a Data Wrapper or a Venn graphic or something like that. And the social media threads are something that you would write to kind of explain your process. As we'll get into in a minute here with the slideshow in the other video, data reporting is a process. You go out and you find data online, scrape it or download it off the web, clean it, analyze it, visualize it, and then present a story and put it in context. So, several steps. And along the way, you're going to keep what's called a data diary, and I'm going to make reference to that a little later in class. The data diary is just a collection of notes, steps that you take in your reporting process, keeping a little Google Doc with your data diary in it. If you've ever seen the movie The Social Network, with where Jesse Eisenberg plays Mark Zuckerberg, and Zuck near the beginning of the movie, sitting in his dorm room, and he's live blogging how he's building this algorithm and building this Hot or Not site, which eventually kind of evolves into what we see as Facebook. He's building these Facebooks for all the different dorm rooms. He's live blogging it and actually creating a little diary, a program and coding diary of how he's doing it, so he can go back and reference it later. Data journalists often do that as well. So I've got a handout here with tons of examples of different professional, everything from sports to Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporting. This Marshall Project story on police canine dog bites won the Pulitzer Prize. It's just a fantastic project. Well, the people who built it, many of these take several months, to build these investigative projects. And so they explain this process in a Twitter thread, a series of Twitter posts that are threaded together, and explain kind of how the sausage is made. So let's take a look at this first one by Mary Jo Webster from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. She's one of the best data visualists in the country. Has been doing it for many decades. She's really, really, really good. She worked on this project called Justice Denied, and this is prior to the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis. They've had trouble with their legal system and the police for quite some time, long history of it. And so what she did was had a graphic up here and had the link to it. in a little infographic that she drew up here. We'll show you how to do these a little later. Person's face and then their quote, drop quote right here, and then a link to the story. So it's kind of an overview. Here's our series that we did on, actually it's Denied Justice. She actually got the title wrong up here. It's kind of funny. And then her Twitter thread, she just kept hitting the reply down here, and she numbered them 2, 3, 4, 5, and she goes up to about 8. Typically or actually she goes up to 12. So she went a little deeper than what you typically would. Most of them are around 8 or 10. She kind of explained, where the story idea came up, how they pulled public records, some FBI data, how hard it was, some obstacles they had to overcome, things like that. Talks about how they analyzed the data using Airtable, which we'll explore a little later in this semester. How they scrape PDFs, which you will be doing in a couple of weeks, and the different programs they used to build the graphics. And then she winds up down here with the story again and mentions that at the end. Students have used this in this class many times. This is a Twitter thread by Jeanette Romero. She wrote this one in the spring of 2020. This was some of the early reporting that we did on COVID-19 data for Redline Project. She actually did little screencasts of some of her animated graphics, which you will learn to build. You'll work with these data sets. This was COVID cases by country in the early weeks of the pandemic. And so she did her first post as, here's some quick data, here's how many people have died so far, nearly 250,000 people in the world had died, just in those first couple of months. Here's a link to her story, and then she had her little animation here. Step 2 was another one of her graphics. She did cause of death, average cause of death, and where COVID stacked up against heart disease and other things. And another chart here, and she provided context. She explained how they worked. This was a little Venn-gauge graphic that they did of data. They had little interactive videos in there, which was really, really cool. They based it on CDC data that they had pulled. And so on and so on. She went down and she had 8 steps here and then kind of wraps it up again with a link. Not only did she share her work, she shared some of her final project partners' work on this. So you'll be able to do this on some of your exercises that you work on throughout the semester. Your sports one, maybe your Venn-gauge or your Google Flourish assignments, something like that. Kind of explain, keep notes on, hey, pulled this data set, here's how I analyzed it, here's how I put it together as a graphic, here's what I put in my story that will accompany the graphic, and then I posted it to my Medium account. So that's a Twitter thread. And most of you probably haven't written one before. You've probably read many of them. Take some time now to look through some of these examples. This one on the Marshall Project, looking into the canine dog bites, is really good. New York Times did some really elaborate graphics on Tulsa, Oklahoma's Black Wall Street and how it was burned down, nearly a century ago. Really good piece. There's some fun sports ones down here if you're into sports. There's a great one that Jack Silverstein did on the history of the Knicks versus Bulls series, things like that. So, take some time to look through these and get a good feel for it, because we'll be visiting it again throughout the semester. All right, this is it for video 1. Video 2 will be up on the syllabus, and you can click on that, and we're going to do a little slideshow on basics of data journalism.